Crash Bandicoot is a series I hold close to my heart. When I was about 4 or 5 years old, my mother had got me an old PlayStation 1 alongside this game. This was the game where a young watery opossum first discovered his true gamer rage. This game is hard for a kid's game, and now as an adult, I found it easier than I did when I was a kid, but I still struggled on a lot of the levels. But boy did some of these levels, like the famous boulder dash and hog riding levels, bring back some memories of controllers flying across the room at Mach 10. Now I normally start talking about the story here, but there isn't much to say really. If you're familiar with Super Mario Bros. Or Zelda, you're familiar with this story. You play as Crash Bandicoot, who was genetically modified by an evil scientist named Dr. Neo Cortex and his assistant Embryo. After the experiment fails, you see a very smexy Bandicoot, which you then have to climb the castle to save her from her fate. The gameplay is a lot like Super Mario Bros, except in this game, you can use a spin attack to kill enemies, and that's it really. It's a solid platform all around, but the main issue I have with the gameplay is your hitbox and enemy attack hitboxes. There are moments throughout the game where an enemy's attack will obviously miss you, but you will still die anyway, and it's really frustrating. But if anything in this game is your arch nemesis, it's not Dr. Neo Cortex, it's depth perception. Yeah, it's kind of hard at points to judge how far away something is from you, especially if you're running towards or away from the camera. It was my main source of death throughout the game. Another issue with the gameplay is controlling Crash mid-air when trying to make small movements. It's almost as if he loses all momentum when trying to make small adjustments, but after a couple of hours of playing, you do get used to it. As you can tell from the gameplay, I'm playing the Insane Trilogy remasters for this review, and as far as I can tell, the soundtrack is the same as in the originals. This was a huge nostalgia trip for me, as I haven't heard this music in almost 15 years. The first game is a very fun platformer with some janky hitboxes and that infamous Crash Bandicoot depth perception issue. I give it a solid 8 out of 10. Now as a kid, I played my fair share of Crash 1, but Crash 2 was my bread and butter.
Nice.
I must have beat this game over 100 times on the PS1 and was my favourite of the series. And this time around, this story doesn't follow the Princess in the Tower trope that a very similar platformer recycles every time a new game comes out. The story opens with Dr. Cortex falling into a cave full of crystals and getting an idea to build something. 1 year later, Crash is hanging out with his sister and gets teleported away by Cortex, where he tells you there is an evil force that even he's scared of, and him and Crash should work together to stop them. He then tells Crash that there are purple crystals in each level that he has to collect, so that way Cortex can make a weapon to stop this new threat. Later in the story, Crash's sister takes over Cortex's communications and tells us that he's still the bad guy and is making some kind of Death Star. Yeah, it's not much of a twist. At the beginning of the game, Cortex talks to his new assistant, Dr. Engine, about manipulating Crash into working for them, but this game is meant for kids, so I'm not going to be too harsh on the story, but I do think this story is an improvement from just copying Super Mario's story. And speaking of improvements, the gameplay is better in almost every way in this game. Starting off with the level selection. Oh my god, this room brings back so many memories. Comparing this type of level select to the first game is amazing. As much like the first game's story, it was pretty much a copy of Mario's level selection. But this room and the new story is where it really feels like this game is developing its own identity. Not that it didn't already have an identity in the first game, but this game I have zero comparisons for to any other franchises, which is a good thing. However, there are still some major issues, especially with the last 5 levels, which is a real shame as the rest of this game is great. And my issues with those 5 levels are these things.
Oh! Ew! Dude! What the fuck?
I nearly committed an atrocity after fighting these things for 4 hours. Everything I had mentioned about the hitboxes being fixed does not apply to these guys. I felt like so many times I jumped over them and missed their tentacle only to die anyway. And overall, I think the level design for these last 5 levels is a steep drop off from the rest of the game. They also decide to introduce this jetpack, which controls like arse, and you need to use it for 2 out of the 5 last levels and for the final boss fight with Cortex, which was very annoying. Now let's bring this review back to something positive, the soundtrack. Where Crash 1 was mostly different sounding jungle beach, which fit the game's setting, but after a while would feel really boring, Crash 2 expands much further with its musical range. You of course have the jungle beats from the first game, but but the Warp Room, Snow and Space levels, there's more of an electronic feel to the music. And for the water levels, there's a surf rock sounding songs playing in the background. Overall, I think this range of music is a huge step up from the first game. I have to give this game a very solid 9.5 out of 10. This is such a huge improvement from the first game. Even though the last few levels kind of suck, if you persevere through them to the finish, it is just an incredible game. Crash 2 being a huge step up from Crash 1 made me super excited for the third game, and they did not disappoint. I have to give these games props yet again for not following the Princess in a Castle story for multiple games in a row. In fact, there is only one story element that carries over from the second game, that being the crystals. This time they have introduced the two wooden masks you see in the first two games as actual characters. The one that is friends with you being named Uka Uka, and the one Cortex is friends with being named Aku Aku. It is revealed that at the end of the second game, we awoke Aku Aku from his slumber, and that he is the real mastermind of Cortex's whole operation. This time, instead of getting crystals to power a death ray, they want to power a time machine, meaning that this game takes us to different time periods like the Middle Ages, Ancient Egypt, and the World Wars. Yes, that means in this game, Crash Bandicoot is a pilot in one of the World Wars. The game doesn't specifically mention which World War, meaning it could potentially be canon in the lore that Crash Bandicoot fights a specific German political party that I have gotten in trouble for mentioning in my previous video. Thanks, TikTok. Now, I praise Crash 2's gameplay for being a huge step up from the first, fixing almost all the issues I had with that game. Although Crash 3 isn't buggy by any means, there are some gameplay choices I find good, and some that I find questionable. Let's start with the good. The core gameplay is exactly like Crash 2, but this time around when you beat a boss you gain an upgrade to your arsenal. These upgrades are a better slam, a double jump, an upgraded spin which you can glide through the air with, and a gun that shoots fruit. And this is where my positives for the game end, unfortunately. Now for the dreaded negatives. The biggest of them being the depth perception issue making a return. They had gotten rid of this issue in Crash 2, so it is baffling that they brought it back in this game. There is also an abundance of enemies that track you in this. Now there was enemies like this in Crash 2, but you only saw them every now and again. It seems like the only reason they are in mass abundance like this is for artificial difficulty, as this is definitely the easiest game of the original trilogy. But these issues are nothing compared to the underwater levels and the motorcycle and jet ski race levels. These levels control like hot stinky ass and have led me to become a severe alcoholic after beating them. I seriously don't know what it is with these games having gimmick levels like a jetpack level in Crash 2 that control like shit. But at least in previous games, these levels were few and far between. In this game, these levels are everywhere. But unlike the gimmick levels in this game, the soundtrack absolutely bangs. This game has to have the most diverse soundtrack out of the three, with there being different songs for what time period the level is set in. And although these songs are all varied, they all have the underlying jungle beat that is instantly recognizable. Here are some examples. Overall, Crash 3 is a good game, but I can't say that it beats out Crash 2 by any means. I don't think you guys will understand how much those fucking motorcycle races piss me the fuck off! So I'm gonna have to give this game an 8 out of 10. Oh my, where to even start with this game? I guess we can start with the fact that before doing this review, I didn't even know Crash 4 even came out. I heard no buzz or hype for this game, which is worrying, considering it was the first new mainline Crash game since the 90s if you don't include the remakes. But upon booting it up, I noticed something. Why does Crash and Coco look different? In fact, why does everything look different? Why did Naughty Dog decide to do such a drastic redesign of the characters? Wait, why isn't Naughty Dog's logo in the opening credits? As you can probably guess, Naughty Dog did not make make this game, and let's get into why. From an article I found by PlayStation Lifestyle, it says that Naughty Dog's relationship with the Crash Bandicoot IP holder, Universal Studios, has soured over the years, with one of the Naughty Dog developers stating, "Our relationship with Universal had gotten to the point where we couldn't continue to make Crash Bandicoot games. Although we love Crash Bandicoot and we love working with Sony, it didn't make any financial sense. Universal owned the IP, and there was a hostility there that was just brutal." But after hearing all that, I do have to state that this isn't the first time a game had heaps of drama behind it and still turned out to be a good game. So why don't we dive into the story and gameplay to see how well this turned out. Now, I normally give a complete story synopsis in these videos and have done for the previous 3 Crash games. But here's the thing. I did not enjoy this game at all. I will talk about the gameplay later, but for now we're just going to stick to the story. My main issue with the story being it takes too much of a center stage. In the previous games there was a story, but it was all in the background allowing you to enjoy the gameplay. But oh my god, in this game characters just don't shut up. You're constantly being talked to in gameplay by the next boss you're going to fight. There is a cutscene at the end of almost every level, and the story tries way too hard to be funny.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Now, the last 3 games had humour in their story, but because you weren't constantly interrupted by people talking, when a joke was made, it was actually funny. And even then, the characters weren't trying to crack jokes every time they opened their mouth. The last 3 games were kids' games that had humour even adults could laugh at. This game is a kids' game with jokes I couldn't even get my 7-year-old brother to laugh at, and he watched me play through most of the games. I can't even tell you what this story is about other than they go to different dimensions, because every time a character opened their mouth, I'd zone out and go on my phone because I couldn't wait for them to stop talking. Which, by the way, the subtitle for this game is It's About Time, but they don't even time travel, they dimension hop. I understand they could be referring to the length of time between Crash 3 and 4 coming out, but the subtitle would have made way more sense if they continue the time travel story from the 3rd game. Although the story is bad, the gameplay is okay. I mean, there is this new mask system they have, which I just found to be more annoying to play around with than fun. Quickly explain the mask. Every time you find a new mask, there'll be parts of a level where they give you some type of new power to help you traverse the level. There's a mask that allows you to phase shift, one that makes you spin and fly for a short period of time, and one which makes you slow time down. I'm sure there are more masks, but I never got to experience them as I had my save file corrupt randomly when I tried to start a level, and I lost about 4 to 6 hours of progress if I had to guess. And this save file corruption also corrupted my footage, so that's why I can't show you it. This is the first ever time I have had a save file corrupt on a console, which led me to investigate if this was an issue with the game and not the console. Which I found this Reddit thread from 6 years ago talking about the glitch. They do state that this mainly happens on the PS4 version of the game, but I am living proof that this can 100% happen on the PS5. One last thing I would like to point out is when I review these games, I like to put the difficulty on what I think the developers intend the difficulty to be. For most games it would be called normal difficulty. For this game it's called modern. This makes it so you have infinite lives, meaning there is no point to break boxes and get fruit to gain lives, unless you are a completionist of course. Honestly, the only good thing I can say about this game is the soundtrack is pretty faithful to the originals. So yeah, this game is shit. I promised myself when I started this series that no matter what, even if the game is the worst I have ever played, I will at least complete the main story. But after losing all my progress, I just couldn't bring myself to mentally push through it. This game gets a big fat 4 out of 10. I do not recommend this game at all. I'd just like to put a quick message at the end of this video thanking you all for the support, especially over on TikTok. If you guys are interested, I do have a YouTube channel that I'm showing on screen now. If you'd like to go over there and subscribe. But anyway, thank you and bye.